Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. Today, my guest is Leslie Pearlman, who is a yoga teacher, but she is such an interesting person. She has quite a background. She even talks about that she started as a child actor. So that was a surprise because I didn't know about that. She didn't put that in her bio. But yeah, so she really was hit by COVID. And so that was one of the intriguing things that I wanted to talk about. It's funny, we didn't even get to talking about it until like midway through the episode. So a lot of the beginning part of the episode is her talking about her background and how she was an attorney, and how the life of an attorney and the attorney life she had actually didn't pay the bills. So she became a yoga teacher to supplement her income, and how it really wasn't what she ultimately wanted to do. It really wasn't what her gift was, what she was best at doing. And I think she was a really good, she was a domestic violence attorney, and I think she was good at it, but it didn't light her up. And, we always want to be lit up in life. So about towards the latter part of the episode, we get into some really great stuff. And I love her 5 spiritual practices she shares, because they're not what you might think. And so they I think are really food for thought on what kept her going in face of fear, but still working towards the dream that she had, because it was a long journey. When you hear her story, it was a long journey when she finally decided to leave that attorney life. It was a long journey, and 2 husbands later, and she's now online with her business, and COVID drove her online with her business. And that's a great story too. So I hope you can stick around and listen to the whole thing, because some of her perspectives towards the end of the episode are really amazing. I share a quote that's on her website that I really resonated with. And how yoga has really been a key player in her life, and now is like her living her dream, and she's changing lives using that practice. So yeah, and she talks about Y2K. We all remember that, and how that was a big pivotal point in her life. So I hope you enjoy Leslie as much as I enjoyed meeting her and interviewing her. So without further ado, let's get on to the episode. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And with me today, I have Leslie Pearlman. And I'm very excited to talk to Leslie because she has an interesting backstory. She was a domestic violence attorney turned now yoga. She does yoga. She has an online. She got shut down from COVID. The poor people who had studios and were affected severely from that. So she's a benefactor of that, I guess I should say, because now she's taken it online and she can do it anywhere and help anyone, which is amazing. But I think her story is so interesting because, she completely pivoted, and she did do some yoga before, while she was an attorney, but I am excited to hear more of her story along with you all. So welcome to the program, Leslie.
Thank you, Lori. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Or I should
Um,
say welcome to the podcast, not the
yeah,
program, but whatever. All right. So
I don't.
yeah. So share with me, if you don't mind sharing your age, because it's really, I really attract people who are over 50. So you're like a perfect person to inspire. So if you
Well,
can
I'm more
share.
than happy to share my age. I'm
Yeah.
53.
53.
Yeah,
Woo-hoo.
53,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know what I thought 53 was going to be, but it's way better than I thought it was going to be.
Yes, I so agree. I said my 50s were my best decade, and my 60s are even better.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to
So you have a lot to look forward to.
excellent. Success.
Yeah. So tell me how you went into law. Like, how did that happen?
I if you asked my mother, she would say I probably came out of the womb arguing.
Mm.
And, I grew up in a family where we really were encouraged if we saw injustice, or if we thought that something wasn't working, or we saw something that was upsetting, to actually do something about it. So as a young kid, I always felt moved when I saw things that I thought needed fixing.
Yeah.
So, so it's really not a surprise actually that I wound up being a lawyer. Although it's funny, but before I did that, I actually was a performer. So I was a child actress.
Oh,
Yes, I don't even know if you knew that.
no, that
And
wasn't in your little bio.
and I had,
So,
visions and dreams of doing something like that, and in fact started college in an acting school,
oh,
then pivoted then and decided that I really wanted to pursue the law.
so
And
where are you from?
I am from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you're still there, so that's
I'm still,
yeah,
yeah, kind of there.
okay,
And of
kind
course,
of.
I never thought I'd ever move out of Brooklyn. I mean, I've been born, bred, and loved it there. But
So New York is kind of like there's a lot happening there in terms of acting gigs because you could have
yeah,
Broadway and you have probably advertising and
yep, and
ads and
when
stuff.
I was a kid, I did, commercials and voiceovers, and I auditioned for things, and, I went to a high school that was a theater high school, so that was kind of what I had always thought that I was gonna do. But, the truth is I was also, there was a part of me that I really loved studying. I loved the law. I loved the idea that, you could create you could argue for something that mattered to you. I love that you could advocate for people and create change. And I didn't really feel like I was going to be able to do that acting. So,
Yeah,
you know,
is it? And I think about domestic violence. Attorney. You see a lot of bad stuff, and I mean, did you feel also that in some cases you're powerless?
yeah, I mean, that was really one of the biggest challenges that I had. I worked for legal services and I ran a domestic violence advocacy project. So we represented women who couldn't afford an attorney and who were really at like their wits' end. And there was not a lot of support and resources for people. And here they would finally get an attorney to advocate for them, whether they were trying to get a divorce or whether they were looking for child support or whether they wanted to just keep their children or find a place to live. And they would get into a system, and Brooklyn Family Court was completely overwhelmed, and a system that just was not working in their favor. And they were really reduced to a number, and there was like a lack of humanity in Brooklyn Family Court. And it was very frustrating,
Yeah,
especially because, I wanted to support people and help them make a difference. And no matter what you did, it felt like you were just kind of like hitting up against a wall.
yeah,
So
yeah. And I
still,
imagine it's kind of dangerous too, because I mean, there's some crazy people out there, and if you're helping somebody that is preventing them from doing whatever they want to do with this person, I would imagine there's some scary stuff there.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I was removed, right? So
Hmm.
I wasn't fearful for me, but the responsibility that you feel for a client,
Hmm.
especially when you tell somebody that if they follow step one, step two, step three, then they will be safe. And then it turns out that in fact, they're creating more of a risk in their life.
Hmm.
It's a huge responsibility. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it is frightening. It's frightening for everybody who's working for people and for our clients as well.
Yeah. So you were telling me that you had always this thing with yoga. So you can talk about that because you said your mom was into it, which I find super fascinating because, if you're in your 50s, she must be in her 70s and
Yes.
you
And
must,
and my mom still does yoga with me every single day, which
that
is
is so
kind of nice
awesome.
that she introduced me to it.
Mhm.
But my mom did yoga when it was not popular. She, would do, I always thought it was weird. She was, in her bedroom, in her nightgown, doing these breathing exercises and stretching her arms over her head. It was just this thing that she did.
Where'd
And
she find it? Do you know?
It's funny. There was a very small yoga studio in Brooklyn. I still remember the name. It was called the Solar Yoga Arts Studio. And it was not like a yoga class that you would think of now. It was probably 3 hours long. They would go, they would have a reading, they would sit in meditation. They took a cold shower. I don't know. It's now that I'm telling you this, it sounds like my mom was like very strange things.
Well, they didn't
But
have the internet, so she had to
no,
have go somewhere, right? Yeah.
exactly.
And
But
what an immersive
yeah.
experience. I mean, that's a commitment. Now, was she a stay-at-home mom or was she
No,
working
no,
outside the
no.
no.
My mom worked. She had a very successful career in publishing, actually,
Mm,
and my mom was editor of a number of different magazines in technology and in health as well. She's since retired.
yeah.
But she turned me on to yoga. I took a first yoga class with her when I was, I think, I don't know, 7 or 8. I can't remember. I remember the feeling of floating and feeling super relaxed at the end. The other funny thing is we had where we grew up down the street was the Brooklyn Temple, and my family was a member of this temple only because they had a gym, a swimming pool, and an exercise room. And my mom also took me to yoga classes there. And that was really when I first started like enjoying yoga. I did it with my mom, her best friend, and her daughter, who was my best friend. And so we
Mm,
started doing yoga when I was really a teenager.
mm. And so when did you become, because you were saying how it was really helpful as a practice
Mhm.
during your while you were going to law school.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
it was
yeah.
helpful for me. I mean, I didn't realize it. I didn't rely on it as like as a resource when I was in high school. It's just something I did occasionally. And then in college, I started doing it more regularly. I was also into fitness, so I was also doing like different kinds of fitness classes, and I started actually teaching fitness classes. And then when I was in law school, that's really when I started practicing yoga more consistently because it made me just feel so much better.
Mm.
Law school was really stressful. Um,
Yeah, a lot of people in I think in our age range, remember step aerobics? That was really
yes,
big.
I
Like in the
taught step aerobics.
did you? Did you? I loved it, but I was like really left foot. It took me a while to get the things down, and then once I did, I was like, yeah,
Yep.
I like this. But I still actually have a step thing in my furnace room. So yoga is so different.
Mhm.
It's just so I think back in the 80s when I think about all the cardio and step aerobics and all that, yoga didn't feel like you were getting fit.
You
So
know,
yeah.
well, it's funny, now that I look back on it, I realize that, I loved doing step aerobics and I taught all of those classes. But to be perfectly honest, I feel like what was motivating me then was more to punish myself. And what I mean by that is that it was really to stay fit because I didn't want to look a certain way, right? I didn't want to be flabby or I didn't want to be out of shape looking. And a lot of it had to do with it wasn't so much the pure enjoyment of it, but it was really for me to look a certain way,
Interesting.
right? It's
Yes.
true. I'm telling on
Yes.
myself, right? But
Yeah.
what yoga was an opportunity for me to actually start really liking myself. And like treating my body in a way that was really loving and healing and helpful and healthy, and to feel like I was using all of the different parts of myself. Yoga is really like a whole body experience. It's not just, your physical body. It's, helping with the way that you think and the way that you breathe and the way that you process information. Um, so it's very, very different.
Mm.
And, I started to discover all of these things about yoga, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah. And so you at some point made a decision to stop being an attorney
Yeah.
and go all in on your yoga
Yeah.
business.
You know,
Was
it
yeah.
it's yeah, I mean, it's funny, I really loved my work, and I would leave my job. And it's funny because as a legal services lawyer, I actually wasn't making that much money. So I had to supplement my, legal career by teaching. And I wasn't teaching yoga at this time, I was really just teaching fitness. And I went on a, yoga retreat while I was practicing law. I took a long vacation. And when I was there, I felt like a completely different person. And I made the decision on that yoga retreat that I would take a leave of absence from my job and study to become a yoga teacher, like really dive in and learn more about it.
Where
And
was the retreat?
So the retreat was in the Bahamas. I mean, who wouldn't
Mm.
want to spend time in the Bahamas at the Shivananda Yoga Ashram?
Mm.
And so they had just vacations that people would go on, these wonderful vacations where you would do yoga twice a day and meditate and have delicious food. And you were at this beautiful place. It was very rustic, it was not fancy at all. Um, so I took a leave of absence and I spent about 6 weeks. I think I extended it a little longer, almost 2 months living there, studying, getting certified. Yeah.
So did
And
you leave and go back or did you stay?
you mean yes, no, so I
You-
went back home after the
Okay.
vacation,
Wow.
and, you know, the vacation actually, now that I think about it, was New Year's Eve 2000. And do you remember that was with the Y2K where we
2K.
thought the whole
Yes.
world was going
Yes.
to,
I worked at AOL. It was a big deal.
yeah, of course, right?
The world is going to end.
The world was going
None of
to
the computers are going to work anymore.
So I decided if the world was going to end, I was going to just be at a yoga retreat. What better place to do
That
that?
is great.
And I went
Yes.
by myself. I didn't know anybody. And when I was there, I know it sounds hokey, but I felt like I had this spiritual awakening. I was sitting in this, like they had this very rustic yoga space. They called it the temple on this cement floor, and people were singing and meditating. And I just felt a peace that I never felt my whole life.
Mhm.
And I wanted to just know more about that. So I went back home. I told my job I was taking a leave of absence because I don't know, I had months of vacation time stored up and they
And
let
were
me.
you married at the time? Because
No,
saw
I
that
was
your husband.
not.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not. I was single at the time.
Okay.
And I went there and lived there and studied, became a yoga teacher with the belief that I would come back and continue working as a lawyer and teach on the side. And after about a month, I realized I couldn't practice law anymore. And I quit my
Mm,
job right then and
mm.
there.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
so brave. So, yeah. So, what made you think that you would succeed at that?
You know, it's funny. When you ask me that question, I don't think I ever doubted it. I mean, honestly, I felt like the feeling that I had, like I just felt in my gut that this was something that I had to do and that I was just not going to question it. And decided, I mean, now that I look back on it, I see what I did. In the moment, I just felt like I had no choice, that I was suffocating in my life in law and my life as a legal services attorney, that I just couldn't do that for one more day. And I'm sure there are other people like listening who know that feeling, the feeling like you just can't do it anymore. And now when I look back, I see that I was really trusting in in my gut and my intuition and relying on that information as being the most important information to rely on, not the reason, not the intellect, not what other people were telling me, because everyone was telling me I was a little crazy to do something like this. So I
Yeah,
had,
because being a lawyer is a lot of, well, at least mothers of children dream
yeah.
about, my child is a lawyer, and then to leave that behind, it's super, super brave. But I get what you say because, if you, because it was came from somewhere deep inside,
Mm,
you kind of just knew that you'd be okay. I love that.
yeah.
Um, so that was 2000, you said. And then you had your own studio by the time COVID hit.
Yeah, it took me a while to get my own studio. So
Okay.
I decided actually to move out of Brooklyn and move out to the eastern end of Long Island, which is where I live now, so I could be closer to the beach. It was a place that just like filled me up, that I loved so much. I think I just got tired of just doing what I always thought I was going to do. Like I kind of felt like my life in a lot of ways like planned out for me, and I really wanted to design my own life. And so I decided to move to this beautiful place. And it took me a long time to build my business, to continue learning. I since then met my teacher, my yoga teacher, right? So my first teacher training was an introduction, but then I really found the one person I wanted to study with. And so I worked with her and apprenticed with her and taught with her for many, many years. and taught in little yoga studios, got my first gig, started working with people one on one. And then, there's a whole big like middle story, right? The middle story is, I got married. I'm now not married to that person. I'm now
Mhm.
remarried to someone else, but I got married. I had a child. Um,
So
and the
that was
interesting
after you did the retreat? You
Yes,
had your
after I
child?
did the
Okay.
retreat and after, right, exactly. So I waited a while before I got married. I got married later in life. I got married and had a child later in life. And it's interesting when I was married to my husband, my first husband, who also was a yoga teacher. He had told me that my dream of opening a yoga studio was absurd and told me it's true and told me that he would never support me in that vision. So I just put that dream on hold. It's really hard to go after a dream when your partner isn't going to support you, especially
Yeah.
with a young child.
That's
Um,
usually a sign
yeah,
that you're married to the wrong person, but yeah,
exactly,
sometimes they come around, but yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Uh,
so
so
needless to
was
say,
there
that's
envy
over.
involved or because
I
he
don't know. I
wanted?
mean, I think that it is true that it's not a get rich quick kind of career choice.
Oh, he
And
married somebody who had a law degree and maybe
yeah,
did he think that, yeah, you'd go back to that or something?
who knows? But
Yeah.
anyway, so needless to say, when I got divorced, that was when I really made the decision to go after this like big dream that I had, which was to
Yeah,
open.
plus you're a single mom
Yeah, I was
too.
a single mom.
What
Yeah,
a, that is amazing. So
yeah,
what were your biggest fears and how'd you overcome them? Did you have fear that you would be able to take care of your daughter? Or, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if your ex-husband had, as a yoga teacher, I'm not sure how much he was able to
I have to
contribute.
say my ex-husband, has contributed and has always contributed as best he can. And I have, a support system of, my parents have always supported me. I feel like that my parents have helped raise my daughter, which is wonderful,
Mm,
because they live very close. Um, but my biggest fears were obviously, of course, like, am I going to be able to support myself and my daughter? Or, I some of the fears that I had were that I'd be a failure at my dream, that I would
mm,
look foolish, that I might be making a mistake. I'm sure you can relate to some of those.
mm-hmm,
Um, but the other thing is when I really looked at that, there was like the flip side of that fear was that I might actually be a success. And sometimes the fear of success is something that stops you from actually like taking a big bold leap of faith.
mm,
um and to be honest, I think I might have been a little fearful, um that people would judge me for what it is that I really wanted to do. um and to carve the way, because I really didn't have any role models for people who were kind of unconventional in their choices.
mm,
My parent, although that's not to say exactly, I mean, my father's an artist and a sculptor and a writer, and my parents are very creative people, but they were conventional in a way in their creativity, and this felt like a totally bold new path. Did you ask me how I overcame those fears?
well, yeah, you just, when you have fears and then you address them, what does that look like? I mean, what, how did you overcome them?
I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, I kind of just doubled down
Hmm.
on my spiritual practices. And I don't mean like meditating 10 hours a day. I don't mean that, but I mean, I think of my spiritual practices like these five very important commitments that I make. One is to my to trust, to trusting
Hmm.
myself, to trusting my body, my gut, my intuition, and to like just decide that I'm going to have unwavering faith in that. The second is to really trust in like my ability to follow through. I think of this as like our vitality or an energy, that your energy is going to like sustain your dreams, that it'll be bountiful. And then I really focus on like solidifying commitment to my integrity and just choosing over and over again what is right for me over comfort and over ease. Because I think what happens a lot of times is like when you're doing something risky or bold, Like we slip back into what's comfortable because the uncomfortable feels so scary. But you have to just be committed to just keep going, even if it feels scary.
Mm,
And then, a commitment to being really resilient, which is, that you can, and a belief that you can flourish in the face of life's, unpredictable uncertainties. And then to really feel like connection to something bigger than me, right? To force or
yeah.
to spirit or to whatever it is that you want to call it. So
Mhm,
that the mundane tasks of the day to day feel more sacred, because when it's like that, it's a little bit easier. um, and then the last thing I would say too is that, my mom gave me this very funny advice about marriage. My parents have been married for over 55 years now.
that's
And
great.
yeah, and she had told me that in marriage, a lot of times, like, you don't really feel it. Like, you might not be feeling like the intimacy or the love or the zing, after all that time. And that it's like a muscle that you have to keep building all the time, and that sometimes you have to fake it until you feel it. But if you stop tending to building the muscle, then it just is gone.
Mm,
And so I feel like that's a lot about courage when you're struggling with something, or you're uncertain, or you're trying to overcome a fear, is that you have to just build the muscle
mm,
of, right, of bravery, by
mhm.
just doing it and just trusting that you'll find evidence of it in your life over and over again, and you can't overthink it. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
kind
I
of what
love that. I love that. I also learned, so I've been married twice. So my first marriage, I was married 25 years, and this my goal is to like have 50 years of a combined combined marriages.
I'm on
Since
the
I
I have
can't
the
have,
same
yeah.
goal as you, because I'm
Yeah.
4 years into my second marriage.
Yeah. But what I found is like what you're talking about, I love her whole idea and analogy about it's a muscle that you got to keep working on. But I often find that, how you get into these like, I'm going to work out, kind of mentalities. I feel like that if you use that analogy in a marriage, it's like one person is always like doing the workout. It's like, it changes who's doing it. But as long as one is always like building that muscle, then, and when you're both doing it at the same time, it's amazing. But yeah, it's kind of like that just as long as somebody is always in it and wants it.
Like, it's like building, it really is. I mean, this sounds so corny, but it's like building a fire. I have a wood burning stove in my house, and I really love building fires. And you have to just keep tending to that fire.
Hmm.
And you can have like an ember that's almost out, but you just have to, open up the stove and it will just spark again.
Yeah, I love that. Were there any unanticipated surprises along the way? There's
uh
always those.
yes, there were. I guess, one is that it actually felt less hard than I had anticipated. And I think it's because I just made this decision that I would keep taking action, even if I couldn't really see like what the next steps were, right? To just continually like put one foot in front of the other. I think also like what surprised me too is that not all of the people in my world like were along for the ride. Also, like I lost some relationships, and then of course made new relationships. But that was hard. There was grief in moving from one kind of life to another kind of life, and I think a lot of people don't anticipate the grieving process. Um, and other surprises were, I felt like I got tested in a lot of ways. Like I had to keep redefining my boundaries about what I was willing to say yes to and what I was willing to say no to.
Mm,
It's like I think back to like maybe when you look back at your own life and you see that it's like there's separate times. There's the time when you were in childhood, and then there's the time in your first marriage, or the time, when I was a lawyer, and now this time. And who you were in those times changes because of the life that you're living. And so you can't play by the same rules as your life keeps evolving. You have to keep looking at it. And that kind of surprised
creating new rules.
me. Yeah.
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 Kind of reinventing rules along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
To align with who you are in that time. Yeah. That's so great. So you basically pivoted because of COVID.
Yeah.
COVID hit all the fitness industry so hard. So is that something that you look back on and you were like, oh shit, and now you're like, oh yay,
Well,
or
in New York, it hit us really hard. Every state was very different, but in New
Mhm.
York, there were like the restrictions about returning, because this was March of 2020, were so limited that there was no way that I would be able to operate, at least at the beginning. And right before COVID was hitting, I was working on I'm also a yoga teacher trainer. So I teach people how to become yoga teachers. And I had been kind of planning on creating a new training for people about how to live yoga, not just be a yoga teacher, but how to really live the principles of yoga in your life. And I wanted to do this training online. And I thought to myself, well, how am I going to convince people that you can actually learn something online and not be in person? And then lo and behold, COVID came, right? And
Ooh,
all of a sudden,
yeah.
everyone was online and everyone was on Zoom. So,
Mhm.
in some ways, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it was the thing that that pushed me, that I would have felt a little more cautious about trying. But at the same time, this was another death, because I had this beautiful community and studio, flourishing studio, that had been running for over 10 years, and it was really a fixture of
Mm.
the community that I live in. So it was very hard to close that and to
Yeah.
make the decision to go online.
Yeah.
The thing that surprised me the most is, I went online, I literally pivoted overnight. Like, I made the decision to close the brick and mortar, and then in 24 hours launched my virtual
Wow.
studio without walls. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, in a way, you've got to serve, you got to,
yeah,
just because you shut your doors doesn't mean you still have that community, and
and,
they want you, they want to
and they
access you.
and
Yeah.
they need it even more than ever,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
people really need it more now
So
than
they
ever.
were probably like,
Yeah.
thank God she's doing something.
And
So yeah.
I've been
Mhm.
open, I have had people since, I mean, this is going on what, almost 20 months now. And I have people that have been practicing with me every single day for 20 months that have not stopped. And
That's
yeah, it's
great.
pretty amazing.
That's
So
great.
it
Says a
was
lot about you. So, and your business is you, because I went to your website, good ground yoga.
yoga, yes.
That's like coffee beans, but good ground yoga.
Good ground. Well, good ground is then I live in Hampton Bays, and so the indigenous name of this town was Good Ground, and that's where
Oh,
the name. Yeah. So, but I have a virtual studio where we have a huge community of people that practice together. We all know everybody. It's on Zoom. Everybody has their cameras on, and
that's awesome. I'll have to check it out. And I see that you have a 30-minute class where you can just, try it out if people want to try
absolutely.
it out. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to just say, I love this quote that I saw on your website, and it was it is, be brave enough to cause an upset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of my motto. I think of that, I talk a lot about spiritual warriorship. And that is really sums up what it means to be a spiritual warrior in your own life, is to really be brave enough to cause an upset, because anytime you are willing to have an unconventional life, it's going to ripple the waters a little bit. And, that is really, when you ask about fears and how do you overcome your fears, you have to be willing to create upsets in your life, because that's when you get to really design your life as this extraordinary masterpiece. And, the other extraordinary thing is, when you are willing to cause an upset, you start to see that the challenges in your life, because we have so many of them, are opportunities to flourish, right? That those challenges, they can transform you or they can limit you. And what we do at Good Ground Yoga, and what I really help people learn how to do, is to build that kind of like courageous resiliency muscle. It's not just your quadriceps or your abdominal muscles, although that's part of it, but to treat the yoga mat as this beautiful laboratory for life, because I think that that's the place where you get to practice the skills to live a courageous life.
Yeah. I love that. So, what does living a not your average life mean to you? And
Yeah,
how do you exemplify it?
it's pretty much that. I mean, I
Hmm.
feel like, it's also like, I know these sound, pretty, tried and true sentiments, but it's like marching to your own
Mm.
drum. It's funny. I was thinking about this, and I look back on photos of me when I was in kindergarten, and I was the kid in the kindergarten picture where everyone's in their like their best clothes, and I'm in my dress up clothes. Right. So I was the one wearing the sparkly clothes and the sequins and the three sunglasses and my little purse, because I always just wanted to express myself slightly differently. Um, so I think it's a little bit of just that kind of energy. And the other thing is to have the courage to make this brave-hearted decision not to pretend anything in your life. Because I feel like being average, and this is not a judgment, but being average is kind of like just going with convention. And when you decide that you're going to embody the feeling of things to be really authentic over convention, that's when it gets really exciting.
Yeah. It's so funny you should say that because I wrote last night, I do a weekly podcast email newsletter, and I was really trying to think about what do I want to say for the beginning of the year?
Yeah,
What is the important message, even though I send this weekly? And what I decided to do was, and this, we won't air this until probably we're 6 weeks into the year, but I just, you made me think of it. But it's so funny how it's surreptitious the way you brought it up. But I reran or republished one of my most listened to episodes, and that is with Alex Paulos, who teaches people, whether they're aligned with their authentic self or not.
yeah,
And so I thought the best message for this year is to live as authentically, know who you are, figure out if you're not feeling aligned, there's a lot of signs on what that is. But the most important thing you can do to live your best life and to be happy is to live in alignment with who you are. And a lot of people just are trying to, be conventional and just start being a little unconventional, because that's who you are. There's nobody like you. And so
yeah.
that means that it's unconventional, right?
And also, the challenge, I think, when it comes to authenticity is that, um, who you habitually are is not who you actually are.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you have to actually practice being your authentic you. And it's not the comfortable you. The comfortable you is your habituated you. It's the you you've been your whole life. And the you you've been your whole life may not really be that authentic version of
Hmm.
you, right?
Yeah. I
And
love this conversation because it is so true. It's those, typically it's the habits that, if we're not where we want to be, the habits that we've been employing are the ones that have gotten us here. And so it's like, yeah, dig deeper and find, who that authentic you is. And then what new habits do you want to
exactly.
build? Yeah. I love that. It's been such a great conversation. So thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. I've loved
Yes.
being here as well.
Yeah. And we'll link up your website so people can go try out one of your yoga classes. I
And
think
I
it's
have a
awesome.
lot of wonderful free things on my site for people to check
Oh,
out.
good, good, good. Yeah. And you probably also have people that are similar in age. We tend to
Yes,
attract people.
actually, I
Yeah.
would say that most of my students are, you know, late 40s and up,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
That's
sure.
awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. Great
All
to be
right.
here.